welcome to Sustainable Solutions with Planet Aid. I'm Monica Johnson, and I'm going to be your guide for this journey as we take challenging situations and try to simplify them. And it's also an opportunity to learn from incredible individuals and organizations at the forefront of developing and implementing sustainable solutions. Change is not only possible, but it is essential, and it begins with understanding. And today we're talking to Steven Bethell from Bank and Vogue. Stephen is going to be talking to us a little bit about his organization, his company, and this upcoming trip to Panama, where he's going to be a panelist on Garson and Shaw's Reuse Before Recycling conference. So, want to welcome you, Stephen. How are you doing?
I'm really good. I'm absolutely amazing.
So, Stephen, tell me a little bit about Bank and Vogue, and tell me what inspired you and your wife to start this venture from your basement in Ottawa, Canada.
Yeah. So, we were, two scrappy entrepreneurs that we started a business, and we work with charities across Canada and the United States. Essentially, the material that people donate to them. And our first contract was with the Salvation Army of Canada, and
Mhm.
we were lucky enough to have a start with the first 10 years of our company. We had a contract to buy all of the used clothing that the Salvation Army gets that it can't sell in its stores. So our company motto is innovative and relevant solutions to the crisis of stuff. What do we do with all that stuff that we
Wow.
have in our closets? That's what we do as a company.
That's awesome. So, how did those collaborations work? What made you even think that you wanted to, work with the Salvation Army? Give us a little background into that as well.
Yeah, I think look, we when we first met them, there was a warehouse in Ottawa that had a bunch of clothes that they couldn't find homes for, and we just saw an opportunity to be their agents of change, and could we go out and find new homes for the product that people had donated, and clearly they wanted to sell so they could raise money for their organizations. So Bank and Vogue is actually a family of companies. So we started out
Hmm.
as a company that wholesales used clothing, which we still do and is the main part of what we do. But we
Right.
also, secondly, we have a chain of stores in Northern Europe and the UK called Beyond Retro, and those are stores that represent the trends of the day through used. So those are secondhand and vintage clothing stores, which trade under the name of Beyond Retro. And our flagship store is at the Cold Drops in at King's Cross in London. But also, about 10 years ago, we had this idea of what could we do with the clothes that can't be resold or repaired? And we started this idea of upcycling. So we
Mm.
set up a facility to be able to take clothes, cut them up, and make them into new clothes. And then that project has kind of grown so that we are now providing components to new manufacturers. So, for example, we make the upper for the Chuck Taylor shoe in the Renew collection. Or we also make components for the Soho denim bag for Coach, the handbag company. And we also make components for Wrangler, the denim jean jacket company and jean company. So this idea, could we take the used clothing that we get, and if we can't resell it, we can't repair it, can we cut it up and make it into something? And
Okay.
those three companies are a really good example of what we're up to. And then lastly, if we can't resell something either domestically or national or beyond retro, and we can't remake it into something, can we use it as an input to fiber recycling? And that fiber to fiber recycling is the last port of call, but we sort and grade into at scale.
Okay, you gave us a whole lot in that. So let me kind of go back and kind of dissect a little bit. So you've been doing this for like upwards of 30 years, correct?
You make me sound old when you say it that way, but yeah.
but
But
it's
it's
but it's true. Not that you're old, but upwards of 30 years, and that's a lot. So, give us a little bit of insight into like some of the unexpected parts of your professional journey, and what surprised you, even just about how things are going as far as with recycling, reusing, things like that.
I think the big surprise is that youth clothing is a force for good. Youth clothing is a force for
Mm-hmm.
good. I think what surprised me is that when people donate clothes to a charity, what ends up happening is that they are able to sell that product and do really good things in communities across the United States and Canada. So whether it be the Salvation Army, who raises money for food kitchens, or whether it be Goodwill and job trainings, or whether it be the Planet AIDS of the world, it's that used clothing is a force for good, and I feel like that's
Mm-hmm.
something that's a really important lesson. But the other thing is that um, I think that the other journey over the last 25 plus years is actually also been how international clothing can be. And really, you think about, you put clothes in a bag and you put it in a bin. But at the end of the day, somebody somewhere wants to put on a shirt, a blouse, a trouser, a skirt, and they want to go and hang out with their friends. They want to, reflect themselves. The clothes aren't just a commodity like glass cans or cardboard, but they are a reflection of a person and their mood and their hopes and their dreams, what teams they love, what colors they love. That clothing is really a very personable and authentic sort of conversation. And
Yes, it
I feel
is.
like that's something that's often left out in these conversations that, we don't just get dressed to cover our bits. We get dressed to reflect our souls and our personalities.
Yeah, it's almost like your home. Your home reflects exactly who you are. Even if it's on a low scale or a high scale, either one. It's reflecting who you are in some house or some way. How has your approach to wholesale, retail, and design and manufacturing evolved since the early days of Bank Vogue?
Yeah, I think that the retail landscape has changed in the sense that the trends have changed.
Mm.
But in French we say plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. The more that it's changed, the more that it's the same. So, the retail landscape certainly there are items that come in really hot. Leather skirts will be really hot one year, and then the next year it's fleece jackets, and the next year it's the great Lebowski sweaters. So these things have ebbs and flows, but that's what makes it interesting. The change is the chase to the change is
Mm.
what makes the fashion industry a lot of fun. And
Oh, I
also that
love that.
they
The chase
they
to the change. Can you explain that?
yeah, a really good example was ties, during really economically robust ties were skinny. But when
Mm-hmm.
the economy was really soft and hard, ties widened out. It's that the clothes often reflect the moment society's in. If I say to you, hey, what about those guys wearing red baseball caps? You automatically know that it's a symbol of a political movement. Right?
Yeah.
Whatever you
Hmm.
think of that movement, that the clothes reflect a movement or a thought or a tribe, in one way or another.
That's
That to me is really fascinating.
that's really good and just something to think about, I guess, in general. um, yeah. So you have to be really attuned to those movements. I'm saying.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest thing to do is to listen to the moment.
Mm, that's good. One of your latest ventures, as you were saying, is Beyond Remade. Could you explain the company's purpose and how the brand and its designers are dedicated to zero waste? I was looking at a little bit about that and thought that was really fascinating as far as just you getting these designers who are also dedicated to doing zero waste projects.
I think that no one wants to burn up the planet. And and our whole purpose of Beyond Remade was to demonstrate to the luxury community that you can build a luxury item from secondhand or second life
Mm,
or second gen material. So I really like
mm,
this second gen material concept. And so if we can actually just take existing things and remake them into new things, that's the quickest path to a low carbon manufacturing future. Like, look, for the components that we made for the Coach bag. So if you Google J-Lo denim Soho bag, you'll see a picture of J-Lo holding this really handsome blue denim bag that we cut the components from post-consumer secondhand clothes. And what's really amazing about that project, along with Beyond Remade, is that what is really amazing about that project is that Tapestry did an LCA. An LCA is a life cycle assessment. So they look at the process that it takes and the manufacturing process to be able to make the components of that bag. And they look at it through the lens of how much carbon did you use? And then they compare that to if you grew cotton, you milled it, you ginned it, you wove it into denim. What was the carbon savings doing it this new way of using second gen material? Or what was the water savings using second gen material? And the answer to that in this document, which was peer reviewed by three scientists, was number one, the carbon reduction was up to 80%. And number two,
Wow.
it was an up to 95% water savings. So
Hmm.
our goal with Beyond Remade is to demonstrate that that second gen material can not only make an engaging product, it'll make product that has authenticity. It will also make product that has a low carbon or a lower carbon, up to 80% less carbon usage and up to a 95% less water usage. And that's important when we are really faced with the real problems of today. When our planet is overheating, we're obviously feeling the effects of climate change. And one has to ask themselves, which side of history do I want to be on? Do I want to be on the solution side, or do I want to just close my eyes and order more product from the ultra fast fashion guys from Asia?
Hmm.
And these are the
Okay,
questions
so
we all need to ask ourselves.
yeah, yeah. Um, Definitely personal stewardship of our wardrobe. That's and I'll say this, I love purchasing things from thrift stores. And I also do think a lot about where my things are shipping from and and that's not to make me sound like I'm so ultra this or that, but we do all have decisions to make it and you want to feel good about your decisions. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that we all have a responsibility, a collective responsibility to
Mhm.
make those right choices. Well, not every choice is
Mhm.
going to be right, but obviously we've got
Sure.
to fix this problem.
So tell me a little bit about Bank Vogue's commitment to a closed loop economy, and can you explain what this means, why it's important to our environment?
Yeah, I think that um, like anything, these are aspirational goals that we're headed to, and we're a long
Hmm.
ways from it. But all of
Hmm.
the components of our business that I described, so it was resale, domestically resale, international, repair, remanufacturing, and fiber to fiber, speaks to this circle that we're trying to create. We're trying to create an ecosystem.
Hmm.
Um, I kind of believe in what do you think about beavers? Do you like
What do I think
beavers?
about beavers? Uh,
So
in theory,
I
yes.
I'm fascinated by beavers, not just because I'm
Mhm.
Canadian, but beavers are what they call a keystone species. What they do,
Um,
a beaver comes along and they'll dam a creek and they'll create
yes.
a little pond, and then that pond will bring waterfowl in, it'll bring fish in, it'll bring reptiles in, it'll bring aquatic plants. That
Hmm.
beaver, by creating that dam, creates a new ecosystem and
Yes.
an ecosystem that a lot more things go on in it. And we at Bank and Vogue refer to ourselves as BVers, Bank and Vogue BVers, beavers. And as beavers, we are creating an ecosystem of new opportunities and new life. We're creating a closed loop system to be able to create this quite amazing circle of apparel where it can be reused, 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 repaired, remanufactured, and then back into fiber and then back into it. Basically, we are that keystone species We do believe that the beaver is a majestic animal.
Hmm. I have never thought about a beaver in that way, but thank you for that that illustration. That is
But
just a very interesting thought because I when I thought you were going to take it to that they're builders, but you went much deeper with that. So thank you for that again, that illustration. How how do you think that um, innovation plays a part in this closed loop economy?
it's sort of funny, that one has to be a little bit careful not to be too clever and
Mm-hmm.
attract innovation for the sake of innovation. But and really, the best of innovation are mothers of invention. We started upcycling because we wanted to bring in totes into our stores, and we didn't want to go and buy brand new totes. So we said, what if we could cut up the old clothes and make totes? And at the
Wow.
end of the day, all of our innovations have been incremental and really uh, trying to push the boundaries of and really embrace the authenticity of what used is what the material can offer. And because some of the innovation in our space, in the textile space, hasn't been so fantastic. Some of the rain coverings, that is the material that are put on clothes so that it protects them from rain.
Mm-hmm.
Come 20 years later, we know that those material are forever chemicals, and if you lick it, the your nose will fall off. So I think innovation is a double-edged sword that we all need to be careful of, but it's part of the mix, right?
That's interesting because I'm listening to you talk about that rain technology. How much research really does have to go into things like this? I mean, do you think that people are rushing innovation just to be the first ones to say that they've done something, or what's your opinion on that?
I think our lived experience with some of the high street brands, the brands that I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned we're working with, I think it's pretty amazing how much guardrails are put on to make sure that the materials that are reused and remanufactured are safe and frankly are chemical free or are within a boundaries. And the reality is that we know more today than we knew yesterday, just by the
Mm-hmm.
definition of progress. So, there are materials that we know we can't readily remanufacture. And a good example of that is leather, because over the last 50 years, the technology to be able to tan leather has changed drastically. The chemicals you use, the process that they use, in the way in which they tan leather today versus what they did 50 years ago are two different things.
Yeah.
And so, one of the challenges that we have in this space is that we are dealing with the heritage of people's closets. You know, I'll
Okay,
give you a
explain
really good
that, please.
example. Yeah, so a real surprise would be wool. Some
Mm-hmm.
wool is has been treated with formaldehyde. And they treat the wool with
Mm-hmm.
formaldehyde so it won't rot. And then it kind of makes sense. You've got a living thing and you want to make sure it doesn't rot.
Yeah.
But
Right.
now that if you were to go and buy a brand new wool sweater from your reputable brand, they don't have any formaldehyde in it because they've got a
Right.
new technology to be able to stabilize the material. But we know
Yeah.
that wearing formaldehyde is probably not the best thing for you because
Yeah.
it's kind of what we use for dead people. So,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a good example of what we did in the past that isn't necessarily good for the future. But as
Right.
recyclers or as people in our trade, we have to take on the chemical heritage of it. So
Mm-hmm.
it's another element that makes this an exciting and interesting thing.
It makes me think, live and learn, and over the years, you had to learn that that wasn't a good option. Formaldehyde is not a good option. But I think you had to have that lived experience to kind of get that out of the way and understand. Unfortunately, I think that people don't. There are a lot of people who didn't benefit. There's been health implications apparently since we're trying to switch those kind of chemicals out of our wardrobes.
Well, a good example would be you only use poison ivy as toilet paper once in your life.
Yeah. Think we'd get the message real quick. You're going to be one of the speakers at the Garson Shaw Reuse Before Recycling event in Panama this spring. What's the main message that you want to relay to this room full of people? And many of them are already in the secondhand industry in one way or another. So, what would you like for them to walk?
I think that when you speak to your peers, first of all, I think you need to I think you need to be quite humble because
Mm,
there'll be a lot of knowledge in that room that and a lot of people that have lived this world for a long time. So the first thing is I would say is to be humble, but I also think that at times we need to be reminded that used clothes is a force for good. That
mhm,
what we do as a trade, as a business, as an activity is a force for good for the planet. And I feel like that's sometimes important that we remind ourselves of that. That clothes collected generate revenue for charities. The clothes collected means no new clothes. That same new clothes isn't necessarily made. We need to be reminded that the clothes are a force for good. And when you sort of work your day and then you sometimes forget about those important moments of used clothing being a force for good.
You said that there's going to be a lot of wisdom in that room. You can count yourself as some of that wisdom. But what do you think you're looking forward to learning? What is one of the things that you're really thinking that you'd like to learn a little bit more about?
I think that the best learning is that just talking to people in the trade and hearing about what are the struggles of the day and exchanging notes. That camaraderie is of the most important thing. And I feel like that's what I would be giddy about.
Very good. And as a leader in the sustainability sector, what personal philosophies or beliefs drive your passion for creating a more sustainable future? I think you kind of talked a little bit about that, but just to delve in a little bit more.
It's interesting that um, I think that it seems so obvious to all of us, that you should, you know, buy something that's of quality and wear it as long as you can and pass it on to a friend. And um, and I think that, part of my personal philosophy is, as I've kind of made the beaver analogy, is that I'm fascinated by, the forest in which I live in Canada and that ecosystem that we desperately need to protect. And understanding how complex even the life that beaver creates and the amount of activity and wildlife and the ecosystems are a lot more complicated than one would think. A
Mhm.
lot more complicated, but easily destroyed. And I feel like that. I think that's like a main driver of my thinking. But also, my thinking is to challenge how do we deal with this situation where you have fast fashion companies coming in and dumping what I think is like reusable wipes they call them
Mm,
flushable wipes, I think in America.
yeah.
And that's, and so we're making clothes to the cheaper and the cheaper level to the point where they're like a throwaway tissue that really
Mm,
clog the ecosystem that I
mhm,
sort of beautifully pointed out with my beaver. And I feel as if
mhm.
my real push as a company, what we want to push at Bank Vogue is really that it's not just about the clothes you donate, but it's also the clothes you buy and that operate and how that first decision really impacts an ecosystem down the way.
And that kind of leads into my next question. Do you think that producer responsibility is inevitable? If so, do you think brands are going to be proactive in reassessing their fast fashion, ultra fast fashion, or even just, wanting to get more into the eco-friendly clothing?
Yeah, I think legislation is an essential
Mhm,
and will come out. SB 707 in California is a start, but the real question is, is the fine print in these legislations. So there's this thing called eco-modulation, meaning
mhm,
that if the brand has recycled content in their material to a certain degree, will they pay a lower fee for that to be sold in the state of California? And it certainly sees an imperative that for for these closed loop systems to be economically viable, there needs to be an EPR scheme across the United States and Canada, and basically that if you want to produce something, you're going to be responsible to pick it back up again. And that seems to just make sense at the end of the day. So not only are they inevitable, but they're a necessary thing. At the end of the day, people didn't stop smoking because everybody said this is really bad for you. They stopped smoking
Mhm.
because the government started taxing the dickens out of a pack of cigarettes. And so I
You are
think
right about
we
that.
need government to step in.
Who do you think should be kind of advocating for these laws?
Well, I think we all should be advocating for them, and
Mm.
this is the beauty of a democracy. Is we all should have our voice. Um, yeah, we all should have our voice.
Looking ahead, what are your hopes and your plans for Bank Vogue in terms of expanding its impact on sustainability? And obviously, you're doing a great job as you've got a lot going on as it is. But I'm just thinking you've got more in you, I'm sure. So what would be the future?
Well, I hope I get more of me. Yeah, look, I think it's really important that as a company, we keep pace with the changing markets and keep evolving. I think it's really
Mhm.
important that I think what's going to change in the collections are going to change a little bit. That is a dynamic market. The retail market is always changing. Our component manufacturing, we have some really exciting new collabs coming up. And in fact, at the end of this month, we have a collab with Sea Salt, which is a company in the UK. It's a really beautiful line of products. And just to demonstrate again that used clothes is a force for good and keep pushing that envelope. Um, and I kind of feel as if every time we sell one more used garment in our store, that's one less garment produced. Every time we provide a component for our remanufacturing, that's one less first gen material produced. So our job is to get out there and keep the expansion, keep the growth, keep the foot on the gas.
And how can the supply chain lead the charge to ensure that the circular economy is most effective and wherever one finds themselves within that chain?
I don't think it ever will. The only way
Mm,
in which the supply chain will lead the charge is if it's legislated to lead the charge.
okay.
The legislatures around the world will say, if you do not use this kind of material, recycled content material, we're going to penalize you. Because at the end of the day, the supply chain, the supply chain is owned by brands, and the brands are driven by shareholders, and the shareholders are only driven by one thing, and it's their ROI. So unless we
Mm.
legislate them, uh, this idea that brands will be their own great stewards, I don't think that works so good.
Yeah, I think you might be right about that. But that's where I want to end it. But I have one last question because I just happened to read that you are a hat aficionado. Can you kind of give us a little insight as to what it takes to wear a good hat? Anyone wanting to get into wearing hats, what would you suggest would be the best hat to start out with, or best kind of
Well,
hat to start out
Well, ironically, if we're going to go to Panama, we got to wear a Panama
with?
hat. And I think that it's funny because the Panama hat, which was named after I think Roosevelt, who went to Panama to go look at the Panama Canal. It's a little bit
Mhm.
ironic. The Panama Canal is in the news these days,
Yeah.
but we won't go there. Um, I think that there's like we said about the used clothing, and the reminder of why used clothing is much different than any other commodity like glass cans or cardboard that we recycle and reuse. That the clothing, like a hat or a shirt or a blouse or whatever it is, it's a reflection of the self. And so I think that the selections of your hat or your apparel, you want to reflect yourself, and I feel as if that self-expression is I wouldn't want to dictate what somebody else should or shouldn't wear. But the only thing that I would do is to encourage people to have the courage to wear something that reflects their own self and, their hopes, their dreams, whatever they are, and that's what makes us, unlike birds, we can choose our own plumage.
That's good.
And yeah, I would say, choose your plumage well.
All right. I think that's a good place to end. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Sustainable Solutions with Planet 8. And we hope that you've been inspired by the ideas that we've explored today. And we encourage you to search for sustainable solutions that you can pursue in your neck of the woods.
Thank you, Monica. A few reminders to our listeners on the way out. If you want to stay connected with us and stay informed about the latest sustainable solutions, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and please share it with your friends, family, and colleagues. Together, we can make a difference. And remember, change starts with awareness and action. So let's keep the conversation going. Feel free to reach out to us on social media, through our website, and share your thoughts, ideas, and stories with us. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, remember, it's a big world out there, but every small change counts. Together, we can build a better, more sustainable future.